terms of the magazine, we have two major problems with technology, with our readers, and there is enormous confusion on what exactly readers should be doing and purchasers generally, and how they evaluate LED and projection. Today we're looking at LED, but you know they're almost bombarded with this major publicity showing them or making them believe that LED is so dirt cheap, anybody can do it, fling everything up, everything's interchangeable, it's easily maintainable, it'll fit anywhere, last for years, and it's just the buy of the century. And as a magazine, we are inundated with lots of Chinese people I've never seen trying to link up to me on LinkedIn, say, buy my new LED and this, that, and the other, driving us mad. So we are trying to wend our way to try and get a sensible approach to the magazine about how to evaluate the technology, the suppliers, and the in-situ requirements, really, about where it best fits, how you evaluate, how do you match the technology with the appropriateness of the application, and so on. So we can actually give out, I would say, best practice if we get that far, but it's probably pushing it a bit. It's in a technology which has come really upon us over the last year or two and has really caught us really on the guard. So it's amazing how far we've come in a year or so. To try and demystify all this, a phrase I hate, by the way, but I'm going to use it anyway. We have a panel of, I wouldn't say, how should I refer to you? Experts, reprobates, misfits, people who have been involved in all kinds of technologies and LED, who can perhaps guide us through the mist and present us, or give a bit of their, I'll use the word wisdom, but probably common sense approaches to how we think about the technology, which is the true AV style, I think. I like a bit of, AV has a bit of common sense, I think. So just to introduce you briefly, at the end there is Scott Burgess, Director of Special Projects at Creative Technology. To his left is Callum Phoenix, who is Lead Project Engineer at Media Powerhouse. To his left, third along, in case you've forgotten, is Bob Cronman, who is Director of Cronman Associates. And to his left is Nick Shaw, who is Integration Director at Anivali. And on the extreme right, looking extremely erudite, and from Ocean Outdoor is John Kilfeather, who is Director of Operations and Technology. And we should be doing more with you, really, but you know, we should be talking a lot more than we are doing, really. But we sometimes don't ignore, but we should be featuring outdoor more than we do, really. So I shall attempt to try and bring everybody in and tackle some of the issues that we've had as a magazine that will actually, you know, help you think about the technology differently when you come to either evaluate or buy it. And my first question, if I'm going to go by questions, because I'll see how the conversation goes and try and let the flow go, is how are customers deploying LED? And we'll just at the moment start with indoors and then go outdoors, if that's all right. So we've got people here expertise in both. So who would like to kick that off? How are customers deploying LED? Let's start with indoors. Bob Cronman. Bob.
Hi, everybody.
Yeah. I knew you'd start off, but it's probably a good idea, I think. It's the voice of reason.
Some reason, yeah. The indoor execution at the moment, pick your location. Retail, you see it on almost every store on the high street. I'm trying to think. Let's see. It's not just retail. Sports venues, so you get into receptions, corporate receptions, corporate foyers, casinos. They're going in indoor LED. A lot of people are using LED in indoor-outdoor situations, so it's places where it crosses over, but they're using the high-res LED as well. And I won't really jump into the key factors for it, but LED has a durability about it that outlasts, if you buy a decent quality product, will outlast the LCD products that are out there at the moment. So people are looking at serviceability, lifetime, usability, and the brightness of it in high ambient lighting areas. So any indoor situation, whether it's retail, sports, corporate, LED is moving in where the old LFDs, while they're still being used, are LEDs moving in more often. We're also just now starting to see control rooms where 24/7 use is becoming a reliability issue, that there are new products for LED that do have redundant power supplies and redundant data that make them more worthwhile for control rooms on a very large scale now.
Nick?
Yeah, hi everyone. I would agree with pretty much my learned colleague next to me was saying. There's a lot of use, obviously, in the retail space for a lot of fine pixel pitch products at this point in time, where we're seeing a lot of use as a company ourselves, from an integration viewpoint, very much in the sports stadium and arena marketplace. That's both indoor, again, on the finer pixel pitch stuff, but also moving outdoor to give that large wow factor. So we're seeing a lot of good movement there. Corporate space, again, very much in the sort of auditorium area that's opening up more to use LED more and more, reception areas, like those sort of areas.
Callum, what about events? I mean, I'm throwing this around, by the way. We're covering the large number of applications, aren't there?
So, well, not much more of I work more in the system integration side, but from an event point of view, it's so much faster to build, lighter, essentially. So that's where we're seeing, sort of, as from a space trucking perspective, in that as we go sort of even more environmentally friendly, you want to, well, as I say, from build perspective, it's faster. So you, I don't really do that much event. That's not really where, and that's more of a.
No, yeah, sorry. That's why I don't prejudge. You see, just explain what you're involved with and where your LED expertise comes in, or your knowledge of it.
I work for Media House, and I work on our system integration projects with clients, mainly in the media and some corporate sort of background. So we have sort of a bit of digital signage application. So one of our clients was looking to replace, as a time-saving exercise, they had a load of printed banners in their reception area, which has been now replaced with LED. Well, all of a sudden someone can log on, they can change the content at the drop of a hat, which is, as ongoing sort of return on investment, is a lot cheaper than printing costs, staffing costs and that they had previously. And sometimes they had 2 or 3 events a day where you couldn't change as quickly because there wasn't time. Whereas now they can react a lot quicker as a news agency to what's going on day to day. They can actually issue bulletins as such that make them seem more up to date than they could do previously.
Now, outdoor, it's probably pretty dynamic, I would have thought, isn't it?
It is. I think for us, for Ocean, for the last 10 years, the deployment of LED has primarily been in large format, high impact sites. I think what we've seen in the last couple of years is, because of the cost coming down so much, people are able to come in at a much smaller price. So you're seeing where previously 4 or 5 years ago you were seeing much larger, grander sites. Now you're seeing the commoditization and the conversion of a lot of 48 sheets and 96 sheets. So what's happening now is people are realizing that you can change content very, very quickly, and that gives a lot of creative opportunities for brands, and therefore people are looking at LED a lot more because the cost of it has come down so much. It's why you're getting so many emails on LinkedIn, or linked data as you call it.
You see, this is what I have the problem. Yes. This is what I have a problem with. There's a lot of focus on cost and not enough on appropriateness for the application. And I wonder who's driving this, actually. You're doing a lot of nodding there, Scott. Go on, off you go.
Well, I was just going to say one of the big things about LED is it's got cheaper and it's got brighter. So most of the applications where you're competing with daylight is why LED is starting to come in more and more. If you've got an environment where you can control lighting, then there are other means of producing images. And yes, everybody now wants the latest technology, which is LED, because the price has dropped so considerably. What we used to pay for per square metre was £5,000 for C5, I think, something ridiculous we paid, more than that. Now you can buy something smaller and higher resolution per square metre for $1,500. It's a remarkable difference. And that's why it's starting to come into the marketplace more and more. One of the areas that it's highly used in now is rock and roll touring. We use a huge amount of screen at nearly all the venues, basically because of high lighting environments. And as you said, it's easier to rig. You don't need depth like you do in projection, so you're putting up the equivalent of a poster, really, that you can change the image on.
So it's not just a straightforward replacement in certain applications, really. It's probably being driven by people's expectations, is it?
very much the expectations, particularly in the concert world now, with the trying to do the interaction with people with their phones and things to screens. It's the ability now of doing that digital world, for want of a better description, that is also driving this side of it.
So what is driving? Is it integrators or end user requirements? I mean, who is expressing the interest, and how is the market being driven?
In the live event side of it, it is very much looking at the event and then looking at what they're trying to achieve. So, and then money comes into it. The purchasing is down to supply companies like ourselves, who own, you know, thousands of square metres of screen, and trying to match the price. So there is a need to put it on a stage, work in daylight. That then dictates what pretty much can be used, and then those people put it out in the marketplace. There is a challenge at the moment, because resolution is getting higher, that a lot of people don't understand resolution. They just go, oh, I've heard of a 4mm outdoor screen, I want it. But, you know, going back to the old school rule of 1 metre per pixel for resolution, if you're doing Glastonbury, your audience is, you know, 30 metres away. You don't need a 4mm screen on a stage. And the higher resolutions do come with a much higher price.
Well, they're probably half stoned anyway, aren't they? They probably couldn't see a high resolution screen. But that's always the problem we have, really, is how much of these so-called specifications and brightness and are sort of dominating the sales pattern, when in actual fact you need to see applications properly running to see what the effect they're having through the medium you're buying.
Yeah.
Is that too much common sense there, or is it?
No, I think
surprised even me that.
Yeah, it is. But I think one of the key questions a lot of people probably forget at the very front end is, what is that content you're putting on screen? What is it you're trying to create from that image? Because you've got a lot of hidden cost in there as well. It might just be, I mean, everyone talks about resolution. The content they're producing might well be looking to be 4K, possibly 8K, but it's the hidden cost behind that as well. So you've got the screen cost in the first place, but you've got to be thinking about the environments being used in, and is that the right type of content for the type of viewing audience that's seeing that screen? You've got to think about, say, hidden costs, which might include electrical infrastructure, HVAC behind it, ambient lighting conditions that you're dealing with. So all those factors come into play in what it is you're trying to put forward as a screen solution. So, say, content has got to be the starting point, in my opinion.
Is it? Sorry.
Yeah,
Callum.
essentially beat me to what I was going to say, but also the content design side. People say, I want to say an 8K screen or something like that, but the cost in content production as well is going up. Render time goes up, and so as you say, going down to 4mm. If you wanted that on Glastonbury, what's your pixel width on stage? What's your driving at the other end of the line? What's actually sending those pixels to screen? Is your hardware, or what hardware is needed to achieve that? It's not, we tend to work in the realm of 4K, 8K. Realistically, as an event industry, it's not the be-all and end-all. You obviously do drive beyond that, but there obviously comes a point when your cameras are 4K and stuff like that. If you're wanting to do IMAG and stuff like that, you can, yeah, you're fair if you can scale your content and stuff like that, but there always comes a point of diminishing returns due to viewing distance and that, as you say.
That's always been... Sorry, Bob?
I was just going to say there's a real balance to be found between the resolution. Everybody says 4K. I've got a 4K TV. I want a 4K screen. Well, when you get 0.7 of a millimeter for a pixel, which is an LCD, and then you say, oh, well, I want 0.7 of a millimeter for an LED screen, those pixels are extremely expensive. The individual dots of light are really expensive. And as Callum was saying, trying to produce that content, and beyond that, if you're in a retailer scheduling that content, is it scheduled daytime? Is it seeing the same content over and over again? How often do you change that content? If you're a fashion house, if you're Primark, you're changing your content every week because you've got new clothing coming in. Same with Zara. If you're building ships, or if you're on a cruise ship, you're changing your content every week to go with whatever, keep the people interested on the ship. So it's really finding that balance of pixel resolution, content creation, content management, and the budget. And the budget is really where a salesman will say, oh yeah, in the event we saw an 8K screen, we want an 8K screen here. 8K screen, if it's 10 mil pixel pitch, is a gigantic screen. It's the front, it's a chunk of the front of this building. So it's finding that balance, and I think that's one of the issues we have as a group at the moment, is working with the end users, working with the clients, and explaining to them the scope of what they're putting together.
Do you have to go through a consultancy process either as a consultant or acting in a consultancy capacity when you're trying to match the application to the technology?
As a consultant, everybody should go through a consultancy process. Being really honest, yeah, walked right into that one. Do you have to go through a consultancy process? No. You need to have the conversations with one of us sitting up here or somebody who has knowledge enough about the products. If you go straight to a salesperson at an LED company in China, they'll say, yeah, we can build you an 8K screen. When do you want it? Where do you want it? It's 1.8 million yen or whatever it's going to be. If you go to any of us sitting up here, we can explain to what pixel pitch is appropriate. As Scott was saying, 30 millimeter if you're 30 meters from the stage. If you're in a foyer and you're walking past a screen, a 4 mil or a 6 mil might be perfectly appropriate. Getting that explanation in early also helps people understand what their budget's going to be for their content 1 year, 5 years, and 10 years down the road. And there's service agreements that need to go in with that as well. How much does it cost to change a poster? There's going to be some maintenance and operational costs, the electricity that was mentioned, the content that's been mentioned. So there are costs associated with the screens. It's not just a one-off, buy a TV, stick it on the wall, and plug Sky into it.
So at least my next question, in a sense, from what you just said, is what makes someone transition from LCD or whatever technology they've got into place into moving into quite a revolutionary new environment, LED? And presumably it's the content, is it, that makes them make that decision? Because it's the tip of the iceberg, as you say, with costs, isn't it? If you're taking everything into account, it's a major, almost upgrade. That's the right word, I'm not sure.
Well, the costs have come down. So it is more expensive than an LCD, but the life of the screen is longer. It's potentially a larger screen, so a video wall where you might have the seams, which are slowly but surely disappearing from LED or from LCD. You can build a bigger screen that's a seamless screen. There's one right behind us at the moment. So there's that impression factor. That's the let's keep up with the Joneses. Barclays has a big screen like this, so let's go put one into Bloomberg. There's a real sense of we don't want to just have a couple of LCDs on the wall. We want to have a big wall, and we want to have content, and it wants to be brighter. And one of the great things about these is they can be bright enough to cut through ambient light. So they can go in windows for retailers. They can go in foyers that are, or lobbies of buildings that are all glass, and they can run really efficiently and really effectively.
So we're looking at really a sort of infrastructure upgrade. I mean, I can see the costs of the pure screen costs coming down, but I see quite the reverse in the support infrastructure and the content and various other things that help you get the most out of that new environment. So you may be saving money on the LED, but you're certainly spending more in terms of distribution potential and cost of content. I mean, we had that retail roundtable last week where the cost of content was going through the roof, wasn't it?
Cost of content can be managed as any other part of the retail or the corporate business can be done. How much content are you creating? How big is your screen? So if you're creating 8K or 12K or 20K content, you're spending a lot of money. If you're creating HD or UHD, your content costs are the same as they were when you had an LCD screen. The content hasn't changed. Your electricity costs might go up a bit. Your service and maintenance costs might go up a bit. But if you're not creating new paper posters every week, those costs begin to balance out, especially as the cost of these have come down.
I mean, outdoor transition must be enormous. So you're dealing in a big scale, aren't you? I mean, you're having to. I suppose there are restrictions of what we can do in this country compared to other countries, with people going past in cars. But the impact that the screens you have on people must be enormous, and actually the cost of updating an estate must be incredible.
Well, it is. We're in the process of actually upgrading some of our screens at the moment. But I think what Bob was kind of correctly saying in terms of where LCD is great is probably 86, 92, 100 kind of square inch screen. What LED is brilliant at is modular. You can't buy a 40 square meter LCD that you can just take up and put back on a screen. where we are swapping some screens with Westfield at Holland Park, where all of those are coming down, and effectively it's not being pushed by buyers who are saying the resolution isn't good enough, because most people who are buying screen there don't even know what a resolution is. They just know, does it look good? Most of them there are buying the site and buying the impacts, the eyeballs that are actually going past it. Where LED works really well is the fact you can actually have, 3 large screens, all 36 square meters each, and if something goes wrong, you're only replacing one little module. With an LCD, unfortunately, if something goes wrong, you tend to have to, replace the whole thing, and that's what LED is very, very good at, for getting high-profile sites that we have, because most of our sites are more than 30 square meters, so they need something like LED to be able to cut through in terms of brightness and being able to reach refresh rate, viewing angles, which is another important thing, particularly as LED is getting much better in that regard as well.
Well, it only seems 2 minutes since they've been put in.
Well, yeah. Well,
good Lord! I mean,
they're there 8 years.
8 years.
Yeah.
God, that's gone quick.
Yes, it has. Yeah. But that's another thing in terms of lifetime for LED. Like LCD is about 4 or 5 years on average, depending on who you get it from. But LED is, they usually say 100,000 hours, so it's about 9 years. So you do get an awful lot more bang for your buck for it.
What about the supplier landscape? Is it, we're going through a number of acquisitions at the minute from big suppliers, Layard, Ibis, and got Unilumen, as you'll find out, opening a new German subsidiary soon, and it's looking for staff, incidentally. So you're seeing an element of consolidation going on, but how should we evaluate suppliers? It's clearly going to come down to probably a handful ultimately, but not for a while yet. You still feel the technology is going through a change and a development and evolution itself, really, I suppose. Things will only get better, but how should we judge the supplier landscape as it is at the minute? Talking for one who's bombarded by Chinese suppliers every 5 seconds of the day,
Consolidation is interesting at the moment. When I started in LED around 2000, there were 6 big players, which were Barco, Mitsubishi, Lighthouse, Daktronics, and probably another, Toshiba were in it, and Panasonic were in it. Nowadays, of those, Barco are still clinging on with fingers. Lighthouse, to a degree, are still clinging on. Mitsubishi are still producing, but they're still a gold standard in terms of price and quality of build. 10 years ago in China, there were 60 to 80 Chinese manufacturers. My last count was nearly 350 that I get emails from on a regular basis. Of those, the consolidation, Unilumen, Aodo, what would be considered the top tier of the Asian market, have been buying up smaller suppliers. So Unilumen, Mayon, Shenzhen Lamp, and 2 or 3 others. But they don't bring them into the same umbrella. They keep them operating as individual factories for their specialities. For this one does a particularly good outdoor screen. This one does a particularly good this. How do you evaluate the products? It's partially going to the factories. It's partially seeing what other products they've put in. It's looking at more than one project that they've done, because they might have done 5 really good projects over here on an outdoor screen, but you'd never buy an outdoor screen or an indoor screen from that particular company. It's, again, that's what those of us up here who are looking at screens constantly, it's best to ask that question, because I'm sure most of us have been to China or been to one of the factories. We've probably all seen at least 100 different screens by 30 different manufacturers, and the only way to pick from Alibaba is to actually have some experience in going out and looking at the screens, knowing who's made them, knowing when they were made, and knowing where they are in their production cycle. If it's the first 0.6 or 0.5 millimeter screen, I don't want to buy that first 0.5 millimeter screen. I want to see how it works first.
Yeah. And it's also all as that consolidation starts to happen, others are the product ranges within those suppliers as well, that now you have the likes of Daktronics offering kind of tiers between what you're actually getting. So DAX, who put themselves up at a very high premium end, are now offering a kind of a tier 2 product then as well. So I think people are becoming a lot more, who are cost conscious but still want that kind of comfort of the brand.
And that brings up the cost conscious option. If you only need a screen for a year, you may not want to go out and buy a top tier screen. You may not want to pay $2 a pixel. You might want to pay 25 cents a pixel or 25p a pixel. There is a balance to be had in the industry for retail, for corporate offices. Most corporate offices, they want a screen that's going to be 5 years or so before they redecorate. Retail is 1 to 3 years before they want to upgrade a screen, get something better, because the store next door just got something that looks fantastic. We want the same thing. So retail may not want to, it depends on the brand. They may not want to spend a fortune on the screen, but they want a screen that will work reliably for a year. And there are decisions to be made in the type of LED diode, the type of power supply. Are they buying a carbon fiber frame or just a aluminum frame? Because every one of those choices makes a financial decision, has a cost implication for the purchaser.
Callum.
It also somewhat comes down to, from speaking to various different manufacturers, somewhat certification as well. Big push at the moment for potentially, as you say, in the control room application is your EMC. There's talking to one manufacturer back in ISE. They replaced an install that someone did when they turned it on in an airport, and it took out, whether it's true or not, it took out the radar system essentially because of the amount of noise coming out of the panels. So there's definite workarounds that the manufacturers put in to reduce that, but it's making sure that's the difference between potentially going onto AliExpress and buying a panel and it turning up. Where's the safety? We've all seen sort of at various shows with blue power cons in and out, not blue to white, making sure the quality level is there from a safety perspective, from a emissions perspective, which sort of carries through, and especially you see obviously that at the higher price point, that stuff is being looked after.
It's interesting, some practical now. So you spend most of your time in the field, don't you, Scott? I mean, how does that information get back about how products are performed in the field? I mean, you must see lots of things not working or better than you expected, or...
We have a large department that spends its life fixing LEDs. I can't remember which particular one we bought recently that they're having a nightmare with. But yes, we go for carbon fibre because lightness, it's easier to use, the resolutions are being pushed higher and higher. The higher the resolutions, the more damage they're suffering, because the more you push all the LEDs nearer, they get nearer the edge, and if you take the really high-res panels, if you don't put them down straight on the floor, you've just bent the bottom row of LEDs off. So we're suffering, we're saying about 7 mil is about the average for rock and roll. For big corporates, yes, we're doing 4 mils, but we're suffering damage because because people are keeping price down on the way things are built, the way they're structured. They're using local labour. Local labour don't really care about products. So our reporting method back into the office is, big boxes with big red crosses turning up, going broke, and there is not a single product, I think, that is any better or any worse than the others. The real difference is the high-res to the less high-res.
That's interesting, isn't it? How practical can you go? I mean, we're seeing a few of the emergence of these demo areas, and you can compare like by like with screens alongside each other. I mean, how far can you go with those sort of spaces? It struck me as being a very good idea, actually, because then you start to think about what you want to show on the screens and think less about the paper specs, which are not as relevant to your business as you would perhaps you bought something and you actually see your content in front of you. Should we see more of those? Are we going to see more of those? But you need something in scale, wouldn't you? I mean, to make it look realistic.
You do, and I think for, going back to your comment, people are buying at what it looks like. Yes, you need it for that. From the more practical side of things, guys in my industry would want to look at the back, really, to see how it works, because they know what the resolution is going to be like, whether they're using SMDs or not SMDs, whether it's black SMDs, all those various things come into it. But in the practical side, it's the mechanics in our area that make more impact than it does to the actual, what a screen looks like. and whether you can get more of it from other people in the marketplace, because the screen sizes are just getting huge nowadays.
Are they going to continue? There must be a maximum size that's practical.
No, not at all. We did a screen the other day and we had 4 Barco E2s running it just to try and get, I can't remember what the resolution was, it was just enormous.
So what installation problems do you have then? I mean, it must be quite challenging putting this stuff up and...
Oh, that
keeping
was.
it up there.
That was all CB5, which I think is a row 5mm. And that was in the Opera House in Dubai. I can't remember the size of it. It was the biggest screen that anybody's built of this so far. And the practicalities is because it's a carbon fibre base, it's then just engineering, making sure that you get the right trusses in, the right motors in, get the guys together. The biggest difficulty in building any screen is the first row, getting it level. Once you've got it level, the rest of them will just fly straight in.
How fragile is it?
The touring carbon fibre is far better than never buy magnesium. Magnesium phosphate because it dies of age and it's very brittle. Aluminium is good because it flexes ever so slightly, but it's heavy. So carbon fibre is the way everybody's going. And if you've got a 5mm, a 4mm, it's reasonable. It's going back to the 2.5s and the 1.9s and things like this, which are really installation products, and they should be treated as a proper installation, not thrown into a venue doing a gig, pull it out overnight, throw it in a box and take it off somewhere else.
Yeah, quite. Which brings me on to service and maintainability. Do people consider that sort of option when they're looking at this? Certainly with the new technology, I thought, when they're putting in for 4 or 5 years, I mean, it's got to be pretty high on my priority, thinking of it in a corporate sense.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose the key advice I'd give to anybody when you're talking about service and maintenance on particularly fine pixel pitch stuff, make sure that you've got a robust SLA in place with ideally the integrator or a partner that knows how to handle, calibrate and commission products correctly. That's key, I think. But importantly, make sure that you've struck a relationship with the supplier, if it's Chinese or whoever, to get a fairly large amount of spares. So you're always going to need them, and you want those to be off the same production batch as the main screen production, because obviously a lot of those LEDs are bin graded, so you want them to be of the same type, if you can at all possible. Also age those spares, if you've got any possibility of aging them. That way then, if you do have a failure and a need for a swap out somewhere down the line, hopefully that replacement that you're putting into place has got that same degradation that's already happened. So it makes it far easier. But yeah, the only real advice is to find someone that really does know how to handle it. That finer pixel pitch stuff isn't easy. Has to have a fair amount of care and attention taken with it. You have to handle it with quick kid gloves on because it is fragile, and just pick the right partner to be doing that for you.
Bob, what about you? Any bold piece of advice there?
Access. When it says front access, it does not mean front service. When it says front service, it doesn't mean you can go around the back and plug it in when you're doing the installation. There are key features that you become familiar with over time. We bought this stuff, it's great, it's front access, great. So we're installing it, and we're 100 mil from the wall on a steel frame that's not quite square. There are great challenges, and I'm sure Callum faces this, and Scott mentioned it, the structure, how the structure is built behind it, whether it's rental or whether it's a fixed installation, determines how well that screen's going to go up. If it's straight, if it's hanging, if it's flush, can it actually support the weight that you're putting on it, which was, we've all had challenges where things, you don't want screws pulling out of the wall because when you build a wall this big, it is quite heavy. Even when it's a lightweight product, it's quite heavy. But the front access, the front service, the Nick's saying, make sure you have an SLA with people, and spare parts. Most manufacturers think 2% of spare parts, so 2% of the tiles in this wall is probably 8 or 10 tiles. Power supplies, probably 8 or 10 as well. You really want to get 5%. That's what I would do if I could, if not more, absolutely. And when you are working on it for service, the people who are servicing it need to have the appropriate tools. So if this is a front access or a front service wall behind us, it's either a magnetic mount or it's got a screw mount. You need appropriate tools, the right tools, or you do more damage to the wall when you're fixing it.
So, go on.
Say, well, the
Callum,
other
yeah.
side of access isn't so much getting into the panels. Can you get to the panels? So we see people more so wanting to put them in the front of their building or high up. Can you actually physically get a scissor lift, a cherry picker, or any way of getting to the panels once they do break? Because they, especially outdoor, if anything hits it or anything like that, can you get to it without closing the road, which has a fairly large cost impact? All that sort of stuff, which sometimes doesn't get thought about until the last minute, and all of a sudden you're like, how am I going to get 10 meters up in the air to fix that tile? And that's what quite often seemingly gets forgotten when, or doesn't get captured very early on as a requirement for install in the design side.
Two things really, from the integrator or the supplier's perspective, is skills. Do they require new skill sets, and investment in inventory, which struck me as being probably a major issue. It was if you're evaluating suppliers, and certainly as an integrator yourself. I mean, what do you hold in store when you're having to probably maintain some big contracts? How much you've got to send away for to get back? I mean, all those sort of key issues which demand a very delicate process of investment and on site. How do you deal with those?
Where the spares are stored is hugely important to where they're going to be used. We work with a company in the U.S. who absolutely demand that all of their spares are shipped back to them. That's great. As soon as the client has a problem, they say, where are the spares? Well, they're in Des Moines. How soon can you get them? Well, 3 days if FedEx delivers on time, and then it'll take us 2 days to get on a plane and bring them to where you are. Spares need to be where the spares are going to be used. It doesn't have to be in the same building necessarily, but it does help if they can be. Access walkways, if on some of the bigger structures we've worked on recently, in the walkways you put plastic tubs or lock boxes, and your spares go in right there on site. The worst thing is for spares or tools not to be available to the people who go out to fix them. So they should be kept accessible. The people who you mentioned, training people to go out. We're finding it hard to get good techs who have the time to go out on jobs, learn how to work on LED, be proficient in LED, and then move up the chain so they can go out on their own, with somebody from a labor group, go out and fix a screen. Health and safety comes into this as well, especially even if you're working in a corporate office where the screen's ground level. As soon as you pull out a ladder, you've got the health and safety guys right there saying, do you have a risk assessment and method statement for doing that work? So it's across the spectrum. It's just like any other installation that has electricity. It's just like any other network installation. There are skills that are required. There are spare parts that are required. There's knowledge that's required to make any of these things work correctly.
I thought it would be a big investment. Certainly the big installations I've seen, I'd sort of thought twice about who's maintaining it, in-house or the integrator, and really what sort of person is. I mean, this is beyond AV, isn't it? I would imagine you need some specialist skills, really.
Well, you don't take your car to the grocery store to get repaired. Well, maybe you go to Costco. I don't know.
No, but that's we're only just now in the last 6 or 7 months starting to think sensibly about LED as a strategic technology, rather than something you can buy cheap. Which is how it was originally sold. Obviously, not via you, obviously. But it was something that we can replace it by this. And I thought, well, where's a sensible thought and where's the legacy thinking going on when you're investing so heavily into this? And we all thought it might be cheap now, but the costs behind it must be quite enormous once you buy into it.
I think that's where the network operators like Ocean really come in, is they're building these networks, and they'll have 20 or 30 or 50 screens made with the same product. So they can have a central store of spare parts. It may not be exactly the same generation of screen, but the power supplies are fundamentally the same. The people who are going out and working on them are fundamentally the same. And there is a network of people who are knowledgeable in the industry. Most of them came out of the rental industry, out of creative technology and Blitz and PRG. They're good technicians who are working for, whether they know it or not, for Ocean and Anna Valley and for Media Powerhouse. They go out and they're great. They can look at a screen and tell you what's wrong with it. before they go and stick a screwdriver into anything. They can look at the screen and fix it. And if you pair one of those people up with somebody who doesn't have the great skills, the person without the great skills learns them slowly but surely, or they're out of the business because they don't want to be climbing up a ladder. I don't think the costs are as great. I don't think it's something to fear. But it is just like buying a car. You need to do maintenance on the car. You need to inspect the car. You need to service it. You need to go to somebody who knows how to do that well. And if you do that, it'll last for 10 years.
Purchasing options, are they straightforward? Can you get it off the balance sheet? Can you do monthly subscription service options or whatever? What options do we have for buying LED?
Sorry. Feel free.
Bit of service-based purchasing, all that sort of stuff, and
So
monthly subscriptions, are those realistic?
Well, I was going to say about the purchasing side of things, I'm not teaching people to suck eggs, but there's a lot of manufacturers out there that are always thinking about their channel model, and they're pushing LED as a commodity item through distribution. My personal opinion, it's not where it should be. I think that relationship should exist more with an integrator directly with the end client, because it's very much project-driven. If it's done correctly, there should be proper planning put in place. So it's not as though it's a rush at the 11th hour to get product in quickly. There's generally a fair amount of infrastructure that goes on behind the scenes. There's probably some structural work to be completed, etc. And if it's a new build particularly, hopefully, if there's decent project management in place, there's several months lead in to when you're actually going to need that LED on site. So it makes sense, in my personal opinion, that you would deal more with an integrator that's a specialist and get them to be involved in the concept stage and the design stage right through to the implementation and then the actual install and then the service thereafter. Like I say, so from a procurement viewpoint, it's speaking to that integrator. Most of the integrators out there, Anna Valley, if I drop a name in that equation, a specialist in that field, we've got very good relationships with a lot of the major manufacturers around the world. We've got preferential payment terms, and we will back off the Chinese payment terms against our payment terms. It makes it very easy for people to transact with us directly.
Well, that sounds sensible to me. I don't know. Is that how people are thinking? I was wondering, actually, whether it's sort of been flogging too much by the distributors. But, you know, you have to have an open mind to see what customers are needing and how they're doing it. But that seems, certainly our way of thought will be very much towards that as a sort of legacy thinking process and taking the bigger picture into account, not just the technology, but where it fits within the overall project requirements. And I think that's the key, isn't it? A lot of the bigger suppliers are wondering that, you know, is this cheap technology going to give us a hard time, and people just buy it for price and not taking into account all the other factors surrounding it, which is a huge decision. Which brings me to the subject of large canvases and the eternal equation of whether you should do LED or whether you should go projection, Scott. How many times have we been asked that question, I wonder? But, you know, we're seeing a lot of it actually side by side, not as a replacement as we originally thought that there might be in the early days, but as a potential mix and match according to what you're trying to do.
There is definitely more mixing and matching going on. If you look at any, for my sins, I do a lot of the large ceremonies like the Olympics and the Asian Games and European Games and things like this, which most of the openings and closing are designed for television. And there's a lot more mixing and matching going on because of the TV audience. They can manage it much better, manage the brightnesses of the two. The challenge is, if you're doing large canvases, is even if you bring it down to the cheapest LED and have a pixel pitch of 50 mil or 75 mil, trying to cover 1,000 square meters, you just can't do it with LED unless you have an awful lot of money. Whereas projectors, you can do it with a number of projectors which are going to cost you per pixel a huge amount less. Just trying to think, what have we got on 100 square meters of field of play? We did with 20Ks for the Solidarity Games. So trying to do, not 100 square meters, it was 100 meter diameter. If you try and do that with LED, you would just not be able to equate it. But what they are finding now is using the LED for spot effects. What you will notice a lot of is what we call the pixels, which were first seen at the London Olympics with the audience having things. More and more of that is happening, so you're not trying to compare the brightness of the projection to the LED or mix it. They become specifics as opposed to trying to make a canvas of one thing. every time we've done a corporate event with huge amounts of LED, you never, no matter how much light you throw at it, get projection to get anywhere near the brightness of the LED. And then the colour temperature is always an argument of trying to match the two. And then, particularly in the world I work in, you'll end up with a lighting designer of some particular name complaining about it's being too bright for his own lights and things like this. So I think there will always be...
Must have given short shrift on that one.
It depends. Well, actually, we did, sorry, just to go into one, in the Solidarity Games where we had 80 projectors on the back wall, you could nearly see it in daylight, and he was complaining so much that you couldn't see his lights, and we were just standing there going, and? But yes, the need for projection is actually getting cheaper as well, because now that Panasonic have got their 30Ks out, people have got more practical, larger units out. Various manufacturers are talking about 50Ks in more manageable boxes. So I don't think projection will go away in the larger events. But again, you still run into the problem of daylight, and you can't compete with daylight unless you happen to have LEDs, really. And that's where the two for installations and things will always stay separate. But for one-off effects and big events, you know, you just can't beat the price of projection.
Anybody like to add anything?
So it's interesting from the manufacturer point of view as well. Say, I think it's Samsung now going down and producing a LED panel for the cinema market, so that you can actually replace your cinema projector screen with essentially a fully DCI compliant LED panel, which is a very interesting. That they obviously somewhere have seen that there is a need for it, especially from in their view, the contrast ratio and stuff like that is obviously much better. In their opinion, we're going down that route.
How far is that going to go, do you reckon? Interesting concept, isn't it? I mean, you know, why wouldn't they, I suppose?
Yeah, say price driven. Say
Right,
as much as a
isn't it?
cinema projector is expensive, the against LEDs are going to be at the moment is more expensive, realistically.
Like got
LEDs will come down, and I think the LEDs will come down as everything does, and then, you know, laser phosphor and stuff is reaching a point where you can't do much more with it. And the lifetime of laser phosphor, they're saying, is 20,000 hours. LED, I'm sure, will be more so when it's not driven anywhere near the brightness that it needs to be when it's in a cinema situation. So that will just extend its life hugely.
They got a slightly sort of different spin on things, I think. I mean, not I know this firsthand, I'm not representing Samsung, but I think their thought process behind going into that cinema industry is that is a waste of space, or wasted space during out-of-hours cinema sort of locations. So they're trying to open up as an event space. So that staging area can be used as an event space, meaning you can have the normal lights up in the house, and you can use the LED behind to run your content as you need to. So that's the thought process behind it as much as anything, I think, if you dig deep into it.
Funny, I saw this incredibly clever retractable seating they're using in Stadia, actually, without it just goes down beneath the floor and actually creates a completely open space. I thought it was quite clever in a very, very big area. So, yeah, it's more expensive. And the amount of money that's been pumped into the cinema industry it's been phenomenal, hasn't it? There's got to be a point where people just say enough's enough, don't they, and whatever. Well, thank you, gentlemen. That was really informative. I mean, it's good to have something that's... we got quite practical there, didn't we? It was really what we needed. And thanks so much for coming today. Much appreciated. Thank you.